Coming up next, we're counting down the top 10 most intriguing and, in some cases, the most bizarre stories behind the greatest album covers of the 70s. And we got a lot packed into this one. Controversial covers, urban legends, and death-defying photo shoots. For one iconic sleeve, two kids were coated with vehicle-grade spray paint to get just the right look. Another cover featured a pair of jeans with a working zipper, but it had to be unzipped because it was scratching other records when it was shipped. Another album cover featured a provocative illustration of a woman, but she later backed out and didn't want her face on the cover, so they kept her body in and drew in another woman's face. Oh, and then there's the one where a man was lit on fire to get the perfect shot, but the wind blew the fire into his face, burned off his mustache and his eyebrows. Then there's a famous photographer who took the worst shot of her life, and it ended up being her most famous photo. We have the songs, the stories, and a special guest coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember trying to choose the right flavor out of the many at Baskin-Robbins as a kid, then this is going to be your channel. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the white button and click the notification bell so you know when our stuff comes out. Also, check us out at professorofrock.com to sign up there for our live streams. So today we're diving into the stories behind some of the greatest album covers, the sleeves of the 70s, back when we had LPs. We're counting down 10 most intriguing tales about album covers in the 70s, from surreal photo shoots to controversial designs. These are the stories that turn cardboard squares into cultural landmarks. I think you're going to dig this one. Let's get into it. Starting things off at number 10, I got the Eagles with Hotel California.
Welcome to the Hotel California.
You know, the 1976 Eagles were ready to unveil their most ambitious album to date, Hotel California. The record was a dark, sun-drenched meditation on fame, and really the American dream gone sideways. To capture that feeling, musically, visually, the band tapped art director John Koch, also photographer David Alexander. Don Henley wanted an image that felt slightly sinister and brooding, something that reflected both the glamour and the emptiness of LA. So Alexander positioned himself on a cherry picker across Sunset Boulevard. It was just before sunset to capture the iconic image of the Beverly Hills Hotel bathed in eerie golden light. The photo shoot took place during what photographers call the magic hour, just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows and a hazy, surreal glow over the palm trees. But the band ran into trouble almost immediately. The Beverly Hills Hotel, a notoriously private institution, had not been told in advance. When they discovered the Eagles were using their building on an album cover, they were less than thrilled. I don't know why. It's rumored they threatened legal action. Still, the resulting image became instantly iconic, both inviting and vaguely menacing, like the lyrics of the title track itself. But what really fueled the mystique was a figure that appeared on the balcony. I mean, you look closely at the upper left window and you'll spot a ghostly shape. Someone or something watching from above. Now, for years, fans speculated about who it was. Some believed it was a hotel guest who happened to step out mid-shot. Others spun tales that it was a cult member, a spirit, or even Anton Lavey, the founder of the Church of Satan. It was a wild rumor that stuck around for decades despite zero evidence. Whatever the real story, the vibe fit. Hotel California was always meant to feel unsettling beneath the surface, and the photo captured that mood in a single frame. Like the song says, you can check out anytime you like, but once you've seen that cover, you can never leave.
Check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Coming in at number 9, we're continuing the prog rock theme with Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Brain Salad Surgery. In 1973, ELP was riding the wave of prog rock dominance. With 3 albums under the belt, the trio was known for pushing boundaries sonically and visually. For their 4th LP, Brain Salad Surgery, they wanted to go all in on something bold and surreal. That vision led them to Swiss artist H.R. Giger, whose biomechanical style later defined the look of the Alien films. The resulting cover became one of the most haunting images in rock history, a fusion of steel and flesh. Keith Emerson recalled going to Giger's Zurich home, where the artist had transformed the entire interior into a nightmarish cathedral. gas masks, arms reaching from the walls, even a bathroom that looked like a sci-fi torture chamber. It was a perfect setting to begin imagining the mind trip they were looking for. Giger presented two pieces, work number 217 ELP1 and work 218 ELP2. The outer sleeve featured a human skull fused into a mechanical frame, its mouth open, hinting at the face beneath. Inside, revealed through a die-cut flap, was a woman's face, her eyes closed, framed by dreadlocks and strange markings. It's often rumored that the model was Giger's, partner actress Lee Tobler, though that was never confirmed. The design was hypnotic and unsettling, exactly the kind of thing you'd expect from ELP. The original working title for the album was Whip Some Skull on Ya, sexual slang phrase that's actually too dirty to elaborate on here. But after Emerson heard the phrase brain salad surgery in the Dr. John song Right Place, Wrong Time,
Just need a little brain salad surgery.
the band made the switch. Now, incidentally, the meaning of brain salad surgery is also something that I can't talk about here on YouTube. Taking inspiration from these titles, Giger incorporated some, let's say, highly suggestive elements into the artwork. When the record company got a look at the design, of course, they freaked. Complaints came in, especially from women working in the record pressing plant, about an anatomical detail that appeared beneath the face on the cover. It looked like a still from an adult film, I'll leave it at that. But ultimately, the visual was toned down to resemble a beam of glowing light. You might add that together. Decades later, the cover became the center of another mystery, though. 2005, both original paintings were stolen from Giger's exhibition in Prague. The artist offered a reward for their return, $5,000 each, and an all-expenses-paid weekend at the Giger Museum in Switzerland. The pieces, they never resurfaced. Coming in at number 8, we've got our second hotel in the countdown. For this one, I'm going with Morrison Hotel from The Doors. Shot by the unofficial lensman of Laurel Canyon's Golden Age, Henry Diltz, the cover features the band steering coolly through the window of a rundown LA hotel. Literal place called Morrison Hotel. I had a chance to talk with Henry about this cover, and here's what he said. Very cool.
Drove downtown, and there it was. Beautiful red letters. We said, man, this is perfect. We go in the lobby. It's empty with old used furniture or a couple of flea-bitten couches. But the young guy behind the desk, I said, we'll just be over there taking a few shots in the lobby, you know. He said, no, you can't. You can't take any pictures without getting the owner's permission, you know. I said, well, where's he? Well, he's not here. And he was, adamant about it. Apparently, I realized later he was a famous slumlord who owned that hotel, and everyone was afraid of him. So this kid was saying, no way, you know. So I went over to the Doors, and Gary, I said, hey, the guy won't let us shoot in here, but let's just walk outside, and we could stand on the sidewalk in front of that window. That'll be great. Okay, sure. We walked out, and they started standing right in front of that window. And I saw a light go on behind them in the lobby, a big light. And I looked in, and he said, oh, that's the elevator light. Big old light lit up. I saw it go on. I said, wait, look, that's the elevator light. The guy left the desk, and he went up in the elevator. Quick, you guys, run in there. Really, literally. And they ran in there. They hit those spots. Jim was in the middle. Nobody said, okay, a little to the left, you know. It just bang. I took one roll of film, 5 minutes, and we got out of there.
Waiting for the sun, waiting for the sun.
You know, I know you're a photographer. You do groups. Well, what groups have you done? I'd say, oh, this is James Taylor. I named the group, you know, Buffalo Springfield. Yeah. I said, and then I did the Morrison Hotel cover. Dude, they'd go, dude, you did the Morrison Hotel. You know, that was the one, you know. That was the one.
Coming in at number 7, we're making it 2 in a row from Henry Diltz. I've got James Taylor with Sweet Baby James.
I've seen fire and I've seen rain.
You know, before JT became a household name, he was just a soft-spoken 21-year-old with a guitar, a gentle voice, and a lot of stories to tell. Now, his first album came out in 1968 on the Beatles' Apple Records, but with his second effort, 1970's Sweet Baby James, that's when the world really took notice. You know, tracks like Fire and Rain.
Yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone.
country road.
On a country road.
And the lullaby title song.
Rockabye, sweet baby Jane.
This quiet masterpiece climbed to number 3 on the charts. But just as iconic as the music was the photograph on the front, a snapshot that captured Taylor's introspective spirit in a single unforgettable frame. Here's what Henry is telling me about how it went down.
I'm up in my kitchen in Laurel Canyon, and it's Peter Asher on the phone. And I knew him, from around town, the troubadour, everywhere. Walked in the living room. He said, Dad, James is sitting over there. He was sitting under the, sort of behind the piano by the window, and he was finger picking Oh Susanna, but so beautifully. I'm a musician. I said, oh my God, it sounds like a music box, because he always has these great chords. You can tell it's James Taylor. And it was so beautiful. I kind of got down and took a few pictures of him. And then I said, we should go outside somewhere where there's good light and we can get pictures. Let's go to my friend's commune. It was called The Farm. We took pictures of him sitting on the running board of an old truck, an old farm truck, and that looked kind of cool. And then we walked over to a little cabin, a little wooden hut, and he was standing against that, and there was a big pole sticking up. And he just kind of walked over and put his arms on the pole like that, And I took a few shots, and I have a framing Jones, really. I like to frame things, and it makes me feel good. When like CSN on the couch, it's rectangular, it's perfect. Well, him like this on the pole, it framed a perfect, rectangle. And I took the pictures. I thought, wow, this is great. They wanted black and white publicity photos, so I took it in black and white. And then I thought, I want to show this in my slideshow to my friends, so I have to do it in color. So I said, wait, James, don't move for a second. And I reached down and picked up my color camera, and I took a few shots in color. Well, they really wanted black and white, but when they saw the color, they said, this would be a great cover. Inside that original album, they had the black and white shot, a fold out. So it was 24 by 12. Beautiful shot. That's the picture I like even more than the cover. But that album, that song, Sweet Baby James, I sang that to both of my little children, as they were little babies, Good night, you moonlight ladies, sweet baby James. So great, boy.
Good night, you moonlight ladies.
It drives me crazy about this lost art of looking at music on our phones, because you're missing the picture,
Yeah, exactly. It's really a lost art form, which... I hope it comes back. People would hold that album and then they turn over and read all the liner notes, and that was always great. That's what you did while you listened to the album.
All right, we've made it to number 6, and I got the only band that matters, The Clash with London Calling.
London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared.
Sometimes the greatest rock photos aren't staged or carefully lit. Sometimes they happen in the blink of an eye, like the James Taylor one we just talked about. This was certainly the case on a cold night in New York City in 1979, when photographer Penny Smith caught one of the most explosive moments in punk history, hell, in rock history. Clash bassist Paul Simonon, mid-swing, destroying his Fender Precision bass on stage. The photo would grace the cover of London Calling and become one of rock's most iconic images ever. But it almost didn't happen. Smith had nearly skipped the gig, and she usually stood on the opposite side of the stage, but that night, something pulled her over to Paul's side. She said he looked a bit fed up. She noticed his mood was off, and like any seasoned photographer, she kept her camera ready. She said, and I quote, I had my camera up at my eye, and suddenly I realized his bass was upended. Took about 3 strides towards me with his thing coming down, and I just automatically started taking pictures. It was just all instinct. And the result, with raw power frozen in motion. What's wild is that the picture, it almost didn't make the cut. Smith dismissed it at first for being out of focus, and she said, you can't really tell it's Paul, but that didn't matter to the band's in-house artist, Ray Laurie. When he saw the contact sheet, he knew that's the one for the cover, and Joe Strummer agreed. Smith pushed back, warning it would fall apart when blown up, to LP size, but Strummer insisted, so she shrugged, well, you're the boss. Now, Laurie, for his part, was already sketching ideas. He saw something really primal in Smith's blurry photo. Now, he picked up a copy of Elvis Presley's debut, and he was struck by the design, a black and white photo with loud pink and green lettering. Laurie saw the same chaos in Penny's photo. He always said the Clash were just as important as Elvis was at the time, and his London Calling cover was a direct homage to that old school template. The final design was a full circle statement, rock's past crashing into its future. In 2002, Q magazine named Penny Smith's image the greatest rock photo of all time. And yes, she's always been conflicted about it. She's just the worst picture I've ever taken. But it dominated my life. I'm pleased I took it, but it's a bit of weight around my neck. That's pretty funny. Well, we're halfway through at number 5, and I got Sticky Fingers by the Rolling Stones. In April 71, the Stones dropped a 1-2 punch, a raw, swaggering album filled with classics like Brown Sugar and Wild Horses, and a cover just as audacious. Sticky Fingers raised eyebrows and redefined what an album sleeve really could be. It was a close-up of a denim-clad crotch featuring a working zipper that pulled down to reveal white briefs underneath. It was bold, it was subversive, it was totally the Stones. The concept came from a creative triangle. There was pop artist Andy Warhol, designer Craig Braun, and actually Mick Jagger himself. The band had just launched their own label and wanted to make a huge splash. Braun's packaging firm pitched a few out there concepts, but as Mick said, Andy's idea, that's the one. Let's do the zipper. Warhol's photo shoot was typically unconventional. Braun reportedly asked the model to play with his pants a little bit there before shooting to achieve that desired look. Warhol loved it. He shot several male friends and never revealed who made the final cut, though. That's always been a mystery, and that's always added to the allure. And then came the zipper disaster. Braun had inserted corrugated cardboard to prevent any damage, but when albums were stacked in transit, the zipper handle actually dented the vinyl, specifically Sister Morphine on side 2, plus other records that might be around it. Atlantic executive Nesui Erdogan was pissed. I mean, the cover was already expensive, and now it was wrecking the music, as well as other records that were in front of it, potentially in record stores. Braun scrambled, but he realized that if the zipper was pulled down to the center before shrink wrapping, it would dent the label, but not the grooves. With added glue, longer drying time, and trained workers at 4 pressing plants, the fix actually worked. The packaging was saved, and the cover hit shelves as intended. Very tactile experience, say. All right, we're closing in on that top spot. Can you guess it before we get there? We made it to number 4, and I got the Cars' sophomore album, Candy-O. Classic. So by 1979, the Cars were cruising on all cylinders. Their debut had revved up radio a year earlier with a sleek blend of new wave and power pop. Man, it was awesome. But it was their second album, Candy-O, that confirmed that they were here to define the sound of the new decade going into the 80s. While the music inside was sharp and innovative, it was really the album cover that first stopped people dead in their tracks. One that we'll have to blur here on YouTube due to its, The vision for the iconic image, that came straight from drummer David Robinson, who was the band's de facto art director. I guess David Robinson had a thing for vintage pinup art, so we tracked down the master of it himself, Alberto Vargas, who created classic pinups for Playboy and Esquire. Now, Robinson soon found himself in the 83-year-old artist's home, surrounded by dusty masterpieces being pulled from beneath the bed. Vargas chain-smoked Lucky Strikes and waved a coffee mug as he spun stories about the golden age of Hollywood. Robinson was mesmerized. When all was said and done, the painter agreed to come out of retirement for just one last piece, this one. The original inspiration featured a dancer named Nancy Beth. Vargas was reportedly indifferent about the project until he met her. Her classic proportions lit a fire in the aging artist, and only then did he agree to take on the painting. For the shoot, Robinson booked a session at a Beverly Hills Ferrari dealership, posing Beth across the hood of a 1972 Ferrari 365 GTC4. But, when Beth got cold feet about appearing semi-nude in record stores across the country, another model named Candy Moore, the name Candy is just a coincidence, she lent her face to the final image. The result was a composite that blended Beth's body with Moore's features. Vargas's final muse, rendered in pencil and pastel. And when the first draft landed on Elektra Records' desk, the executives, they pushed back, of course. They thought it was a little too anatomically accurate, at least for chain store displays. So Vargas adjusted the art, and the final version hit shelves without losing any of its seductive charm. What looked like a simple pinup became a cultural lightning rod, provocative, retro, and modern, all at the same time. And it gave Candy O an unmistakable identity one we'll never forget. Coming in at number 3 on the countdown, I got one of my favorite albums ever. It's the boss, Bruce Springsteen, with Born to Run. Now, back in 1973, Bruce Springsteen released his first 2 albums, Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, and The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. Critics embraced him, called him the next Dylan, but on the charts, both records stalled outside of the top 50. Still, something was building. Springsteen's live shows were catching fire and word was spreading. I've seen rock and roll's future, right? The first album cover was the New Jersey postcard aesthetic. Its follow-up featured a moody portrait of Bruce deep in thought. Both hinted at a rising storm that was about to come. That storm hit in 75, though, in the form of Born to Run. Born to Run was Bruce's all-in moment, cinematic and defiant, an album that chased down the American dream for sure. It needed a cover that could carry that weight, the weight of the music. Enter photographer Eric Miola. He'd seen Springsteen perform, and he was floored. So in the spring of 1975, he sent Bruce a postcard asking for a shoot. A few days later, the phone rang, and Bruce was in. Miola took a train to Long Branch, and he waited. But Springsteen was holed up in the studio refining the songs that would define his breakthrough, and weeks passed. Finally, Miola called Bruce's manager, Mike Apple, and said, you know what, it's now or never. Soon after, Bruce showed up, sax man Clarence Clemens in tow. Now, it wasn't a big production, just a few outfit changes and 2 guys who lit up the frame. To balance their height, Miola placed Springsteen on a 4-inch box while Clarence hunched ever so slightly. Both wore black and white. Leather, denim, t-shirts, Bruce leaned into Clarence with a casual grin. Clarence stood tall and grounded. He had his sax in his hand. They looked like brothers, like a backstage moment caught by chance. Now, Miola kept things moving fast, minimal direction, no overthinking it. Said Eric, and I quote, either I got the shots or I didn't. I shot hundreds of frames. And after hours of setup, the magic finally happened. Bruce leaned into Clarence, the shutter clicked, and an iconic image was born. Eric processed the film that night and delivered a box of prints to Columbia the following Monday. Art director John Berg laid out the gatefold, front and back panels working together as a panoramic shot. It cost more to produce, but Berg pushed it through. Bruce and Clarence side by side, larger than life. The cover told you everything you needed to know before you listened. Born to Run went 7 times platinum in the States, and Bruce believed the cover was instrumental, saying it was one of those records that you didn't have to hear when you saw the cover. You said, I want that one. Amen. Landing at the runner-up position at number 2, I got the Mighty Zeppelin with Houses of the Holy. Man, I could have chosen almost any album cover from Zeppelin, but by 1972, Led Zeppelin had already stormed stages, shattered records, and redefined rock. They wanted the artwork to be as strange and ambitious as the music itself. Guitarist Jimmy Page reached out to Hypnosis, a design collective led by Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell. When the duo met with the band in a cramped Oxford Street office, there was no brief, no music to listen to, not even a song title. The only thing that they were told, the record was called Houses of the Holy. So armed with a copy of Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, Powell pitched a concept based on the book's finale, children leaving behind the earth and ascending into the unknown. The band signed off, and with that, Hypnosis set off to capture the impossible. They scouted locations, and then they landed on Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. It's a sprawling formation of hexagonal rocks rising from the sea. Powell cast siblings Stefan and Samantha Gates as the silver and gold painted children. Each morning, the team drove to the site at 4 a.m., to chase the perfect sunrise. But the skies refused to cooperate. It actually rained for 5 straight days. The crew ran out of body paint and had to resort to coating the children with spray paint for cars. Spirits were low, and Powell admitted defeat. The sunrise vision was out. But then Powell realized he could photograph the children individually and collage the images together, and that's exactly what he did. Back in London, Powell worked in the darkroom to build the collage while Thorgerson refined the composition. They passed the photo to artist Phil Crenell, who hand-tinted it to create the cover's otherworldly glow. Crenell turned Giant's Causeway into a psychedelic dreamscape, or maybe a science fiction hallucination. It was unlike anything else in rock at the time. It was perfect. When Atlantic previewed the artwork to U.S. distributors, some protested, though. The cover would cause discomfort in more conservative markets, they thought. So in order to avoid controversy, the label added an Obi strip with the band's name across the center to cover some of it. But Powell and Thorgerson didn't mind. It added an extra touch of mystery. Now, what's really remarkable is how the artwork managed to echo the album's sound, even though Hipgnosis hadn't heard a single note. That's crazy. It just all worked out. Houses of the Holy is Zeppelin's most eclectic record. I think we can agree on that. It's an album that refuses to stay in one place, and the glowing alien landscape on the cover mirrors that shape-shifting spirit for sure. All right, before we reach number one, I do want to make one honorable mention. I could name like 10 honorable mentions. We probably should do 10 more of these. I'm going to say Left Overture by Kansas.
Carry on my wayward son. There'll be peace.
Left Overture paired sprawling arrangements with philosophical themes, and it needed a cover that could keep up. Artist Dave McMacken delivered just that. A painting of an old man hunched over a desk, scribbling on scrolls of parchment. The image looked like it had been torn from a medieval manuscript, according to drummer Phil Ehart. The band didn't set out to commission this specific design. By that point, they were receiving submissions from artists, and McMacken's work just stood out among the rest. One funny anecdote, though, is that some have said it looks like a toilet paper on the cover. On the back sleeve, the parchment twists into such chaotic patterns that one confused fan dubbed it cosmic toilet paper. I love that. What do you think?
Don't you cry no more.
All right, here we are at top of the countdown, and at number one, who else would it be? I got a surprise for you, though. A 2-for-1 deal from one of the greatest bands ever, Pink Floyd. I'll call it 1A and 1B. And the first of these, you already know. It's The Dark Side of the Moon. Some covers echo the music inside, but Dark Side is inseparable from it. The sleek prism design, one of the most recognizable images ever, not even just in rock, but ever, was the brainchild of previously mentioned Hipgnosis designer Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell. The band's only request was something elegant and clean and graphic. No cows, no collages, no surrealist detours. The prism design was sparked by a moment of inspiration straight out of a physics textbook, actually. Literally, Thorgerson recalled spotting an image of a prism casting a rainbow on a sheet of music. It was creating this rainbow effect, is what he said. Noting how it echoed the lighting effects Pink Floyd used on tour. But that wasn't the only design they came up with. They did another 5 or 6. However, when the concepts were presented to the band, everybody in the band chose the prism immediately. Everybody. Said Storm, and I quote, "No amount of cajoling would get them to consider any other contender, nor endure further explanation of the prism or exactly how it might look." Later, George Hardy airbrushed the final illustration, but when they brought the design to their record label, Harvest Records, they balked. No band name? No title? Just a black sleeve, a prism, and a rainbow beam? What the hell? The band held firm, though. The image was a visual shorthand for the madness they were trying to translate through the music. The finished piece became a metaphor in its own right. Light is clarity, fracturing into chaos. Or maybe the reverse. Roger Waters suggested that the light continue across the gatefold, refracting on the front, reuniting into white on the back, just as the album loops back on itself with that pulsing heartbeat. As the album climbed the charts, so did the artwork. Dorm rooms became galleries. Record store windows were showcases. The prism became a symbol of introspection and madness. It felt inevitable, like the image had been waiting for the music all along. That's what Thorgerson would say.
I'll see you on the dark side of the moon.
All right, Now it's time for 1B. I got Wish You Were Here.
How I wish you were here.
I couldn't pass this one up. The story's just too good. Once again, Pink Floyd turned to hypnosis. Waters had planted the seat with his lyrics, and Thorgerson pushed it further, imagining two businessmen shaking hands. One of them literally getting burned, on fire. At the time, Pink Floyd was they were dealing with a sense of disillusionment, much of it tied to the loss of Syd Barrett. His ghost loomed large over the band, which is what the song's kind of about. Wish You Were Here carried over the same themes of madness and isolation that had driven Dark Side. The band felt like they were missing something, and the cover visualized that absence perfectly. Problem, though, this was 1975, before digital effects could fake fire. Powell asked Thorgerson, how are we going to do that? And Storm, with his usual dry delivery, said, I guess you're going to have to burn a man for real. So Powell hired a stuntman, a guy named Ronnie Randell Jr., who had the swagger of a Hollywood action hero. Now, Rondell agreed to do the handshake scene, but he had a rule. You don't stand still in a fire stunt. He said, you got to jump, you got to move, you got to run, you got to keep the fire behind you. Powell replied, that's not going to work. We need a still photo of two men shaking hands. Now, Rondell didn't like it, but he agreed to try. The shoot took place on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank. The team covered Rondell in flammable gel, dressed him in a fire-retardant suit under a business suit, and lit him up. There was no wind, which, helped, but it was still dangerous. Powell had 3 cameras trained on Rondell. Each burn lasted about 20 seconds. Powell remembered, we started off doing pictures of him running towards camera on fire. It just wasn't working. It wasn't what we wanted. So they had Rondell stay still. 3 takes into doing just the handshake. And then a gust of wind blew the flames up into Rondell's face. He hit the ground instantly as the crew raced to extinguish him. Actually burned off his mustache and eyebrows, as I understand it. But luckily, he avoided extensive burns. After that, Rondell called it. He said no more, and he walked off the set. But Powell got the shot. Wish You Were Here is often seen as Floyd's most emotionally resonant album, and the cover image is as iconic as the music inside. And it really happened. It was real fire, real danger, and a real man burned into history. Man, such a cool cover. Well, that's my top 10. It was very tough. I could do another top 10. Should I do a top 10, another one? Should I do one for the 80s, the 60s? Let me know below. What are your memories of these album covers and these songs that brought it to life? Man, I miss the LP. I love what Henry Diltz said about that. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. Let's have a great discussion below. Let's celebrate the great album covers. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.